Royal Recruits, Magic Archer, and Skeleton Barrel. Now I know this sounds like a funky combination, guys, but I'm telling you, it works. So tonight we're going to be taking a look at this really fun control style deck. So once again, guys, this was a deck that I found on Royale API, and you know, that's just kind of my go-to website. I used to really like deckshop.pro, but I kind of switched over to Stats Royale after that, and I still use it sometimes, but I mostly use Royale API. It's just really easy to use, and you know, you can check out Grand Challenge wins like down to whoever just won them down to the minute. And so I like, you know, kind of surfing those recent winners from time to time and getting kind of off meta but still kind of meta and powerful, you know, Grand Challenge winning decks, because you can definitely take a look at the top 200 as well, and well, that's not bad at all, or the top 1000 or whatever it is, and you can get some great decks there. But I like looking for decks that like pros have figured out and they've established, like, okay, this is a combination that does work if you play it really well. And don't get me wrong, a lot of these great pro players can play well with just about any deck at all. But regardless, you know, it's been established that it's possible to get, you know, 12 wins with this deck, so it's worth trying. And, you know, you'll see a bunch of them that are, you know, playing the standard meta decks, the Three Musketeers decks, and the P.E.K.K.A. Battle Ram Control decks, and, you know, Golem Beatdown decks, and all of that. But occasionally you'll run into ones, you know, here and there that are a little bit off meta and a little bit different. So that's how I found this one. And, you know, it kind of a little bit is reminiscent of that Royal Recruits Barbarian Hut deck that was really popular in the last meta. And I really like that deck, honestly. I really like the play style, and don't hate me, but I'm actually kind of a fan of Royal Recruits. Take a look at that Magic Archer value right there real quick. Gotta point that out. But anyway, I'm a fan of the Royal Recruits. I think that they're a really fun card to play. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, they were voted on Ash's video of, like, you know, the least skilled cards. They were #1. And I totally agree with that, because they're easy to play. You just plop them down and they're really powerful. So that being said, I know they're easy, but they're a lot of fun to play with because they kind of bring this really interesting and powerful split push element that wasn't there, other than with, you know, like the Three Musketeers and maybe like Archers or something like that. You know, they bring it to the game a lot more, and they really open up this whole split push archetype. So it's definitely, you know, it's a card that I am a fan of. I'm glad that they finally found that kind of balanced, nice sweet spot for it, where it's at 7 elixir, the stats are pretty decent, it's not super OP, but it's also not used, you know, in too many decks, right? It's not super strong, it's not super weak, it's kind of, you know what I mean, it's right in the middle. It's they're doing a good job with it. So anyway, as I was saying, it was reminiscent of that deck with the Royal Recruits and the Barb Hut, but since the Barb Hut got that really hard nerf, of course we're going to be dropping that. Now, I say that, you know, tongue-in-cheek, because honestly it wasn't really that hard. It's just a little bit of an HP nerf. I mean, it was considerable HP nerf, but it's not that big of a deal. If you want to play Barb Hut decks, they're still relatively viable. But anyway, you know, they're not as good as they were. And it was interesting to me that they got so popular, because I didn't feel like Barb Hut got any buffs that made it that great. It was never that popular of a card. And all of a sudden, it was like super popular in that kind of, you know, split push deck, you know, the Three Musketeers decks as well. But either way, it's not run in this particular deck, and you know, this is kind of the modern variation of that one, I would say. I really enjoy it, you know. I really enjoyed that last one, and I'm really having a lot of fun with this one as well. So that being said, let's talk about some of the things that were kind of similar to this deck and that other deck that I was just talking about recently. You know, it contains a similar element of spell bait, and it's kind of a little bit smaller elements here and there. Let's go ahead and jump into another replay, and then I'll go ahead and talk about that, what I wanted to say. Going on about how Barb Hut wasn't that great, and here I'm going up against the Barb Hut, you know, decent Barb Hut player here. So anyway, as I was mentioning, it has some things in relation with that other deck that I was talking about. So definitely that element of spell bait. So you got a little bit of an element of log bait, for example, because you got a few things in there. You have the Skeleton Barrel, right? And when the Skeleton Barrel lands, they're generally going to log it or zap it, so there's that. Keep that in mind. They may even like fireball it if they're desperate. Unless they've got something that's going to directly counter it, like a Valkyrie, they're often going to resort to their light spell. Then you've also got the Dark Goblin, so if they've used their log on one or the other, you can kind of capitalize on using the other one. And occasionally, you'll be able to build up really big push especially with your Royal Recruits, and you'll see that they'll end up logging or even medium spelling your Royal Recruits, and or whatever your big wave is, and then you can really take advantage of that Dart Goblin in the back. And notice with this guy, I want to point out how when he plays his Royal Recruits, I almost always wait for him to play his first, and then I use a mine on defense. I mean, that's just classic like Clash Royale mechanics. If you place your units after theirs in the same spot or further down, then you're going to be having the fight on your side of the battlefield. You're going to be having the support of the Princess Towers. You know, in theory, if everything's balanced, right, if it's the same exact cards, you're going to win that fight because you've got that extra support of your Princess Towers. And then you've got basically free elixirs worth of units that are still surviving going on offense. So every time that he uses his, or most of the time I think in this fight, I'm going to hang tight, I'm going to use mine after and use them on defense. You know, same thing goes with like a giant in the back. If they put their giant down first, use yours a little bit later, and you'll be putting the fight on your side of the arena rather than theirs. Alright, so as I mentioned, we got that log bait with the Skeleton Barrel, the Dart Goblin, and the Royal Recruits. I mean, occasionally they'll like log your Magic Archer or your Bandit, but almost never. You've got a small element of Zap bait as well, not as present, but it is there. You've got the Skeleton Barrel, as I mentioned. They will zap the Skeleton Barrel for sure if that's their light spell, you know, depending on their deck, but in most situations. And you've also got the Bats. So if you've capitalized by using your Bats and they've zapped them, you know, and it only costs 2 elixir, then you could send in your Skeleton Barrel a little bit more safely, or vice versa. If you've seen that they've used their zap on your Skeleton Barrel, then you can safely send in the Bats behind, you know, maybe your Bandit or whatever, and they'll be able to go in without the threat of, you know, a zap being able to just instantly destroy them all. Now you've also got a minor element of mid-range kind of spell bait, mostly just with the Magic Archer. And then there's kind of other, you could argue that occasionally people are going to do things like fireball your Dart Goblin. Same thing with like a Princess. They might fireball your, your Skeleton Barrel even, when the Skeletons land. So you could argue that there's a small element of mid-range spell bait, like Poison and Fireball, when they're using it on like your Magic Archer and your Skeleton Barrel, and possibly even your big Swarms and your Dart Goblin. So the overall play style of this deck, what is it? Well, it's played kind of like a control deck, and there's a minor element of bridge spam as well. It's kind of all around the map. I couldn't quite get a feel for it, but it's a lot of fun. It's different, and I like switching it up sometimes. You know, having the monthly balance changes definitely makes the decks fresh. You know, it keeps things fresh, and there's different meta decks, but it generally just boils down to like 5, 10, or 15, you know, pretty much meta decks or archetypes. And so something like this is just a little bit, you know, kind of off the map, or I don't even know what the phrase is, but anyway, a little bit unusual, a little bit different. So I really enjoy decks like this, you know, switching it up like that. So let's see, what else did I want to mention? So the fact that it's a kind of a control deck, you've got the Royal Recruits. You definitely use those on defense. You can use the Bats. They're definitely a defensive card. They're not really an offensive card at all, unless you've got something in front tanking for them, because they're just going to die by the time they get to the tower, you know what I mean? So you've got all kinds of stuff like that. You know, you've got the Dart Goblin with his massive range, great on defense. Bandit, great for taking out, you know, support units and then providing a really powerful counter push threat. And then you got the Magic Archer, also great for sitting back and sniping. You know, you've got your two spells, but that's more the spell choice makes it more of like a bridge spammy kind of deck. And I want to mention that as well. There is a small element of bridge spam as well, mostly just with the Bandit. You could also argue that the Skeleton Barrel and the Magic Archer are kind of a little bit bridge spammy. Magic Archer not so much anymore because he's not as quick, but you know what I mean? Like, you can put him at the bridge and he runs up and he's got such long range that he connects to the tower really quickly. So he's a little bit of an aggressive card. You know, if you've got a big counter push going and you put him, you know, right behind like your Bandit or your Royal Recruits or whatever's in front there, then, you know, he has a chance to run up and connect to the tower really quickly. He can also sit back and, you know, snipe away, and ideally, if you can place him really well, you can chip away at the tower as well. You know, he'll pierce his arrows through whatever the target is and chip away at their tower. Great way to use him. You know, most ideal way to use Magic Archer. I mean, that's basically Magic Archer in a nutshell, right? You're piercing, you're trying to hit the targets behind, and if you can hit the tower, that's perfect. Alright, so as I mentioned, you got that kind of a little bit of an aggressive playstyle, and I mentioned the spells. You run in poison, excuse me, you're not running poison, you're running fireball instead. So it makes it a little bit more like aggressive with like the instant damage. And then the Barbarian Barrel, honestly, that's just because that's super meta right now. If it was, you know, a year ago or whatever, it'd probably be Zap, because that's what was super meta. But right now, Barbarian Barrel is just rampant everywhere as the light spell, so that's definitely going to be your go-to choice. And, you know, we'll talk about card replacements in a little bit, but it's not super vital. You could totally swap it out for something. Alright, guys. The Royal Recruits, I want to mention them a little bit more. I generally use them on defense. You know, I mentioned how they're pretty easy to use, but let's be a little bit more specific. You can cycle them in the back, but they're a great defensive card. Now, keep in mind, you can split them 2-4 now. So what I mean by that is you can put 2 in one lane, I should do this, 2 in one lane and 4 in the other lane, right? Alright, let's jump on into one more replay and I'll continue what I was talking about here. Alright, so the Royal Recruits, as I mentioned, you know, they're great on defense, but you can also cycle them in the back. I don't generally use them aggressively at the bridge, but they can be used like that, maybe in like double elixir time once you get the ball rolling and you got the elixir advantage and you're trying to take out a tower or provide some really powerful offensive threat. But you'll see even there I use them as an opener. And honestly, you know, I will talk about opening moves in a little bit, but that's not that bad of an idea for me because I feel like they're a pretty safe opener. You know, you can use them kind of safely because they provide a decent amount of defense down both lanes at once. You know what I mean? It's not like sending a really slow P.E.K.K.A. I mean, yeah, they're really slow, but it's not like sending a really slow P.E.K.K.A. You know, down only one single lane. They can easily provide, you know, or give your opponent the opportunity, provide for them the opportunity to push really strongly in the opposite lane. Because then you've got, you know, 3 units, armored units that, you know, can absorb a lot of different things running down each lane. So it's a decent opener. But generally, honestly, like the most ideal way I think to use them is on defense. You can get 4 and 2 split, or if you're using them properly and you've got a big unit kind of partway down the center or something, a big enemy unit, then you can actually probably get, or no, you can for sure get 5 in one lane and then just 1 to go down the other lane. A little bit harder, but it's possible. I mean, you've just got this massive swarm all the way across the map. So, great card. I really like them. You know, they're just really strong. So that's why I kind of feel safe using them as an opener or like cycling them in the back when I'm looking for something to do and I have max elixir or near max elixir. You know, they're just getting them on the battlefield. I feel like that's just a good idea. Like, just getting them out there so that they can do their job, provide their threat, you know, potentially chip away at the tower, because oftentimes, honestly, your opponent's not going to fully counter all 6 of them. Like, a few of them are going to get 1 or 2 stabs off in the tower, and you'll see, you know, like, you get a little bit of chip damage here and there. I mean, even now I've got a little bit on the left tower, a little bit on the right tower. You know, unless I'm mistaken, I don't recall exactly. But, you know, some of it's from the Royal Recruits being able to connect there. So, it's just good to have them out there. Like, they're just a good card to have out in the battlefield right now. Given that they're not super risky with the 8 elixir cost anymore. You know, they're a little bit more safe. If you're worried about using them all the way in the back, maybe don't cycle them quite as far. Maybe just hang tight and see what your opponent does. This is considering opening moves. Of course, if you're in the game's already going, you don't want to hang tight because you don't want to leak any elixir. Alright, and talking about opening moves, that's actually what I wanted to talk about next. So I blather on and on and on about the Royal Recruits and how you could use them as an opening move, so I don't need to talk about that too much. But there's a couple others that I want to mention here. So we're going to jump into one more replay, we'll mention those opening moves and some card replacements, and then we'll call it a video. And this is the guy that plays E-Barbs on challenges. Alright, cool. Good last replay, right? I think it was like the first in the challenge or something like that. Alright, anyway, opening moves. You could cycle Bats in the back. You could cycle Magic Archer in the back. Now I'm a little bit iffy about that one too, as usual, because you can you then risk your opponent fireballing or poisoning your Magic Archer and clipping your tower as well, and getting really good value with that, instantly taking it out, basically getting free damage onto your tower. But you could potentially use it, especially if you know for some reason that they don't have, maybe not as an opening move, but like later in the game, if you know that they don't have any medium spell that'll be able to take him out for a positive elixir trade or an equal elixir trade and some extra damage on the tower, then, you know, don't worry about it. But if you know that they do have it, of course, you gotta worry about it then. You know, don't be using him in the back like that. You could also do the same thing with the Dark Goblin. Not as big of a deal, because if they fireball it, it's a negative trade for them. You might find out that they have the log, though, and that'll instantly kill your Dark Goblin, which is a negative trade, but at least then you know what their light spell is, so that's up to you. You could also use him at the bridge as an opener, and he'll almost always get some chip damage off of the tower, unless they do like a predictive play, because he's just so speedy. He runs up there and gets like 1 or 2 shots off before they can do anything. Alright, and again, open with the Royal Recruits, just because it's good for getting them on the field. I don't want to repeat myself too much, so I won't go into any more depth about that. Alright guys, card replacements real quick. For the bats, there's a lot of replacements. You could go like a cycle card, like an Ice Spirit or a Skeletons. You could go, another 2 elixir cost card, like Goblins or Spear Goblins. Probably something that attacks air would be good, considering you don't have too much air targeting stuff in this deck. You could go like Minions if you want it to be a little bit more expensive. There's a lot of replacements. For the Skeleton Barrel, just another win condition. Battle Ram is a good replacement for Skeleton Barrel. Honestly, it's usually the other way around, because not a lot of decks run Skeleton Barrel since it lost its former glory. It was once a glorious, wonderful card, and then it just got nerfed into the ground and was never to be heard from again, even though it got buffed like 2 or 3 times since. Now there's a few decks that run it, but not a whole lot. So anyway, if you want to replace it, you can do like a Battle Ram or another win condition, like, Hog Rider, or maybe even some sort of a beatdown thing like a Giant. But probably not necessarily something beat down. You want something a little bit more aggressive, like a Ram Rider or a Hog Rider, or a Battle Ram, something like that. Make it more of a bridge spam kind of deck. For the Royal Recruits, maybe you could do like a Guards or like a Skeleton Army, like a Swarmy kind of unit. That would honestly be a pretty solid replacement. But that's kind of a big theme in this deck, and it is a common card. So if you're not running the Royal Recruits, I don't know, maybe try a different deck, honestly. Because I feel like that is kind of the core of this deck. It's kind of a Royal Recruits deck. For Dark Goblin, you can always run Princess or like Spear Goblins, some other log bait card. You can switch out the medium spell for like another medium spell like Poison, or maybe you go heavy, go for a Rock or Lightning. And then you can do a Barbarian Barrel. Like I said, you can do another light spell. If you want to replace the Bandit, probably like a Prince or a Dark Prince, something that charges. Maybe even like a Royal Ghost would be decent in there. And for the Magic Archer, just another range support card. Maybe go for something long range like the Princess for more log bait kind of elements to it. Or maybe just something classic like a Musketeer. Alright guys, that is it for tonight. I appreciate all of you taking the time to check out this video. Make sure to leave the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment in the comment section below if you have any questions or just want to say hi. Thanks so much for watching guys, and have a good night.